Hey everybody, welcome to our webinar for TimeZest and CloudRadial Better Together. I am Ricky Cecchini, that bald guy in the picture. I'm the Director of Product Services here at CloudRadial. And today with me is Gerwai Todd.
Thanks, Ricky. Great to be with you.
Yeah, so we're excited about this one, guys. We have a lot of people that kind of know a little bit about both of us. We wanted to make this a little bit official. So we're going to show you a little bit about what it really means to have TimeZest and CloudRadial together. Obviously, I'll speak for CloudRadial primarily. We're an account management platform. We are a client portal tool kind of built into one. So it's kind of a hybridized version. And part of our core kind of bit of operation is ticketing. So we're going to see how TimeZest really works with that for scheduling purposes and all the different use cases that we can do to it. Gerwai, I don't know if you want to add anything else or you wanted me to do more of a show than tell, but up to you.
No, that's perfect.
Perfect. All right, so what we want to mention really briefly, because this is going to be more of a, like I said, a show than a tell webinar, so we're not going to stick too much to the PowerPoint, is we're looking at the next slide here is going to be some helpful links. So we have kind of a main strategy to CloudRadial that we've been slowly kind of pushing out there, which is our land, onboard, manage, grow. Again, as a client portal for MSPs, we're really focused on the entire client experience. So that first link up there, cloudradial.com/LOMG, is going to give you a pretty good taste of the whole platform. Now, again, for this webinar, it's going to be more ticketing focused, but I urge anybody who's kind of interested in knowing what we do and how it all works to check that out. And then a brief kind of plug right now, and we'll circle back towards this towards the end about the special agreement we have with TimeZest and vice versa. So for us, we have a dedicated page for TimeZest pricing. TimeZest users are going to get a special CloudRadial price, and vice versa for CloudRadial users in TimeZest as well. So again, we'll bring this back up. But I think, yeah, I really think this is a pretty awesome thing that we're doing here. Let me go ahead and pull up CloudRadial and I'll show you how exactly this stuff works together. So let me know, I think everyone can see that okay. Gerwai, can you see my digital efforts 2 up here? Is that all clear to you?
Yep, absolutely.
Perfect. All right, so what we're currently looking at is CloudRadial. And again, this is the client portal, and there's a lot of stuff going on in here because this is a demo account that is like very heavily built out. Now, ordinarily, right, we're not necessarily talking about the whole kit and caboodle today. Usually, if we're talking about like typical, kind of intranet of a client portal, we're looking at more of something like, say, this, right? This would be more of an accurate view for a client. So they would have a couple of different options in here to access their day-to-day stuff. And we really build that methodology that the whole reason for a client portal should be to really engage the client in many different ways, right? We have an intranet, we have training, we have a lot of that stuff, but a lot of that is centered around kind of the core aspect that MSPs do, which is ticketing. So when we look at our ticketing module, I'll swap back over here to my main administrator view, we have kind of a homepage that is conducive to that. So I've got a couple of different options. And things that are really interesting from CloudRadial's side is that we're trying to streamline the process of ticketing in general. And that's something we find a lot of MSPs struggle with a whole lot, especially with people that are emailing and calling in, and oftentimes they're looking for a way to kind of integrate their ticketing process and make it really streamlined so they can solve problems faster. So there's a whole methodology that we kind of subscribe to that we refer to as mean time to ticket versus mean time to resolution. And the mean time to ticket is something that we don't really want people to focus on. So that is, how fast can you submit a ticket? Can I fire off an email really quickly to my tech and say, please help, I need some help in this thing, my printer's broken, whatever it may be. That's all well and good, but as you guys know, that's kind of garbage information, so it takes a long time to fish it out of them. What we're looking at in CloudRadial that a lot of people are trying to do is we're trying to get as much detail as we can on the first pass. So rather than just getting that empty bit of information, when I click on a specific dropdown in our ticketing module, right, we can click on a specific issue, they can fill out the necessary information, and that is ultimately what gets sent off to a PSA, right? This one specifically is connected to ConnectWise. So where TimeZest comes in on this, as I'll demonstrate, is we're going to take that even further, because a lot of times the problem is, we can obviously in CloudRadial have customization here. I mean, you can totally build out the entirety of your drop downs, you can customize your forms, you can change all of this stuff. This stuff we're looking at, by the way, is just part of the sample content. So anyone who either has a CloudRadial tenant or is trialing or wants to trial will get exactly what's on screen as far as testing purposes, but fully customizable. But again, that's only really half of the equation, isn't it? What TimeZest does really, really well with CloudRadial is it comes in and it gives that scheduling aspect. So it's not just a ticket going off, but it's actually the follow-up from the technician as well. and have prepared a couple of different use cases of Gerwai that we thought up that I think are going to speak to a lot of the needs of many MSPs. Here's a classic example, right? So if I'm a client, I'm a user, I'm in the portal, I'm logging in a ticket, I want this to be as seamless and as easy as possible. So let's say I got an issue with my printer, right? My printer is broken. I'm going to go to the portal, I'm going to hit that issue and I say, hey, yep, I'm having an issue printing or scanning. Now what I'll do here is, as I click it up, right, again, the form will pop up. I'll say, who's having the issue? In this case, my computer, my printer. Which printer? The main one, right? I'll be vague just for kicks. And then I'll say whatever else I want, right? I want to say this, that, give as much detail as I want. And again, having the ability to customize these, making these mandatory makes it as scalable as you want to make sure that you can handle the information coming in. Now, ultimately, once I've captured that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit submit. And then what's going to happen is TimeZest is going to kick on in the background. So this is currently submitting the ticket to the PSA. And lo and behold, TimeZest is going to come in and directly give me access to schedule a time with a technician. Now, there's some strategy to this. And this is something else that's really interesting with TimeZest. It's not something that just goes off to one guy and every single time it's just the same technician or anything. TimeZest gives you a ton of power to customize who's getting it. So in this specific example, I have this going to a service team, entire service team that we've built out with availability to the most available technician. So I can choose a time, I can click, 11:30 a.m. on today, and it's going to help me take care of that entire process from right here, which is really awesome. Now, this specific example is a super common use case, right? This is a remote access session. I want this handled pretty quick. I can handle that, boom, directly from the portal. So not only is this killer for getting adoption in the portal, a lot of you guys have tried to use the PSA portals or have tried to use something else, and it's really kind of hard to get adoption in those because a lot of times clients don't really see the benefits to it. But something like this makes it so not only are they getting the immediate help, you're reducing not the time to ticket, but the time to resolution. You're getting all that information on the first pass, and they can get the appointment scheduled right there and then. So there's plenty of incentive for them to do it. Now, again, this is certainly a more common use case of support. The thing that I think that we're really excited about is that it doesn't just have to be support. And I know many people are minded kind of more towards the remote session or individual technician. Something else that I would put forth for your consideration is what CloudRadial does when we split apart the typical ticketing or incident modules, which is what we're looking at now, to even something a little bit more, grandiose, which is the fact that we've split apart the incidents from service requests. Now, from a technical level, these are exactly the same. These in CloudRadial generate tickets that go off to a PSA just like everything else. However, what we're doing with these specifically is we're providing them a different visual base, right? So we're basically making them look different, making them feel different because our mindset is we want people to come back to the portal. We want you to have a one-stop shop. We want people to get lots of use out of this. So we're starting to get these pretty and get these looking cool. And we want the clients to feel like they're doing a shopping experience and they have all the control they want whenever they want. And that feeds really, really nicely, especially when we talk about the TimeZest integration here in different use cases. Case in point, let's say it's a hardware pickup or drop off, right? Not an incident, not something that needs to happen strictly speaking right now, but now you don't have to coordinate with emails and back and forth and talk to the account manager and, oh, it's the wrong thing, it's not a ticket. They would come to their portal, they would request that from right here, right? Again, full customizability in the drop downs and whatnot. What hardware are we picking up? Oh, my PC and the laptop and this and that and the printer and so on and so forth. And I submit that guy out, right? And same idea, same action. This is going to go ahead and submit that ticket so we have that nice and logged. And in the background, what's happening is TimeZest is kicking on and it is currently giving me the schedule. Now, this is a different use case, right? I'm not having this go to the service team necessarily. I have the availability to set this up within TimeZest to go to an individual member. So in this case, I have an in-person appointment with John Webster, who's our hardware guy. And maybe I can pick, hey, you know what, it's going to work for me on sometime in May, right? So I've got all the power in the world to go in here, set that up, and same idea, right? So similar technology, similar use case, but obviously a very different effect. In this case, it's for hardware. This doesn't have to stop at these things. And this is something else that I know is very near and dear to a lot of our MSP brethren, which is talking about QBRs. And it's not something I want to dive super, super deep into for this webinar, because I know we're focusing mainly on how TimeZest and CloudRadial work together as far as ticketing goes. But a lot of times it starts up here because those strategic conversations usually start off as tickets, right? A lot of times you're not going to each client knocking on their door and saying, what problems do you have? How can I sell you? you're really looking at the needs that they have and then correlating those to what they may need. So here's a really blatant example, right? Let's say you literally have an option here to set up an account manager meeting. Maybe you want to give them the option that they can schedule whenever they want. Now, it's a little bit reactive somewhat, right? You're waiting for them to come to you with it, but hey, the whole thing for the portal is that you can give them that option there too. So same deal, right? I go in here, I can give my specific concerns, and I can write my notes, and same idea. Now, just like we saw between the service team and John Webster, I'm having a different person come up here. Now it's actually the account manager for this account being scheduled. So I've got my in-person appointment with Jeff Ferris. Same idea here. But less blatantly, and something that I think is a lot of opportunity for a lot of MSPs, is the ability to schedule something with someone that may lead to a bigger opportunity, right? So when we talk about all these different things that we can do, right, we can set this up for hardware drop-offs or ordering, provisioning, and all that kind of stuff. Starting to put these people not just with a ticket that fires off to the PSA, but actually with an advisor can help to discover those opportunities, add more revenue, and just have better conversations. Here's a super practical example of something that might have literally happened to some of you guys, right? You're doing your usual stuff, right? Tickets come in, things come out, you might have some QBRs, you might be wanting to start them, but you're seeing things that may turn into QBRs if you play your cards right, or they just speak to a different need. Great example is a lot of times nowadays people are doing migrations to O365, right? You might have some on-prem stuff, they might be moving over there, and all of a sudden you find yourself in a need for training. Now that's not something you may have caught before, that's not something the client may have realized, but giving them the ability to see that within their portal means that they can come in here, right? They might be offered that up right at the beginning, and I have a lot of stuff in this demo account. And by the way, same thing for this as the tickets. You're gonna have all of the sample content right before you. So if you want to take a look at this with a trial or even in your own tenant, you have full power to play around with this, right? So one of our example options that happens very often is maybe they need training on Teams. And sure, you could just point them off to CloudRadial, and we'll talk about that in a sec as well, how training is integrated, but this might speak to a good need for the client. So when they come in here, they want to arrange a group training session, you can also do stuff like listing a price in here and whatnot. But before it goes off, again, rather than just pointing them to a portal and giving them a dummy ticket to just go fill out, same deal, right? Test, 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 we go off, TimeZest kicks on, and all of a sudden, we're sending them off to not just a technician, not just an in-person call or a pickup, now it's actually to a training team or somebody who's dedicated to that role specifically. In this case, I believe it is me, which I may be freaking it out, that's myself. So in this case, it's a phone call. So I've got so many different use cases that I can get done with this. And again, speaking to the QBR, you've upped it, because it's one thing to send a ticket, but it's another thing to have someone else go, let's talk about why you need this training in the first place. Back to CloudRadial a little bit, pulling a little bit away from TimeZest, that's kind of something else that we can kind of work towards, because though you can set this up, right, the whole idea between us two is that we really round out that whole client experience where we kick it off from here, we handle it from here, and we make the clients have as good of an experience as they can in a single point. So they may request this Teams training course, you may want to discuss it, you may want to set up the training, but CloudRadial itself has a built-in training module within a university right over here. So you could even set that up yourself. So if you wanted to set up Office 365 training, well, guess what? You've just not only identified a need, identified something that you can probe, you've got all that stuff ready to be delivered within the portal. So to your client's delight, they don't have to go learn a new thing or talk about new stuff. All of these courses that you're seeing in my portal right now come with CloudRadial anyways, right? So this is a pretty sweet way to reinforce the usage of the portal, make sure that the clients are sticky, and make sure that everything's kind of working pretty nice together. So something that I found really, really useful, and I'll go a little meta here, is I was talking to Gerwai before about all the different use cases of TimeZest with CloudRadial, and it's kind of ridiculous because on the surface, I was like, yeah, we could set these up and they could set up the scheduling, but the sheer number of things that you can do when you have that power to choose the team, the nature of the call and everything is kind of crazy. And what I have set up on another screen just to show you is TimeZest itself. And I was looking at a couple articles that they have, a really killer one about all the different use cases. And pretty much all of these are applicable with CloudRadial. And I wanted to give a shout out to this article. So anything like we looked at from the show me the problem remote sessions, right? That's like the printer stuff to maybe the specific appointment types for specific teams, right? Maybe you have specialists that work in the networking side versus you want to send them to the security people in the SOC, right? You can do all that kind of stuff. Of course, the VCIO things are going to be a no-brainer for a lot of people that want to spur those and get those set up, and other things like the training sessions and the workstation. So it really comes down to you guys and your own needs and creativity about how you can kind of play these together. But in the end, when you have something that can generate the ticket and you can generate the appointment type and it speaks to the PSA, it makes for a really killer, flawless experience. I would like, just because I know a lot of you guys are going to be asking, and I'll defer to Safi in a moment, I'd probably like to take a look at a little bit of the technicality because we like to dive into it just so you know how the guts of it work. But Gerwai, do you have anything to add to this, or does this sound like I'm not lying about what either of us do?
No, that's great. And you're on a great roll there too. So, the only thing I'd reflect on is kind of back to one of the first things that you mentioned and how important it is to get people out of email for submitting issues and into a portal like what you guys have built. It makes me think back to when Arnie and Linda built ConnectWise. And, for all the years I was at ConnectWise, we only had one really good tool to receive service issues that every end client could easily get to and utilize, and that was email. So the logic was, hey, take this email, parse a bunch of information out of it, take the subject line, put it in as the subject line of the ticket, and then take the body and just dump it into the description field of the issue and the ticket and generate a ticket, and then let the service team take it over from there. And if you think about it, that's kind of a Stone Age tool in today's world. And I think the biggest thing that you all have done at CloudRadial is, because it wasn't lost on us at ConnectWise that we needed a portal, but what you've done really well is create the single sign-on environment where this is super easy for end clients to get to. They don't have to remember another login, and it really enables us to get to a place where, today on average, it's about 80% of tickets come in through email, 20% come in through other sources. We really need to flip that equation, because when a ticket can come through in a structured way, we just get much better service results when we have a better understanding what the issue is ahead of time. I think a lot of times what MSPs are getting into the kind of routine of is when 80% of them come through email, we're spending a ton of time on triage. And that triage requires a phone call, it requires scheduling with the client, it just requires a lot of this extra stuff up front. So always helpful to have more information on the front end.
For sure. And that's something, like, I guess speaking to that in general, right? Obviously, we come from the same kind of angle of approach, but there's obviously different concerns that we deal with in general as an industry. Obviously, all these different tools are client-minded, but none of them are quite so direct. So our goal is to try to make the experience for the client as easy as possible. And there's almost, I hate to say it, but there's almost like a direct antithesis going on here, because a lot of times it's like the email, it's the easiest. Like it's so easy to open up an email, but I really stick to that mindset that it's like, it's worth educating the client on why that's a bad thing ultimately. Because again, it's not about that time to ticket. Like, who cares how fast you can put one in? If you're getting garbage and it takes 50 times longer to solve that ticket, then ultimately it was bad for all parties involved. And I think we've spent so much time trying to add features into this product specifically and working with vendors like yourself that make it a smoother experience, that I think it ends up actually being really cool for them, especially the fact that they can start to customize their own thing. So back in training, which I know is a big thing for a lot of people, it's not even just about just offering them their own stuff, but a lot of times these conversations that you might be missing on that are just kind of going under the radar are the ones that end up generating the most value to the clients. It may not even be an upsell, but just the ability of going, hey, we need a training course and I didn't even think about it, but why don't we just build it in our own portal? And that's how you get adoption for a lot of these things. Something else that I neglected to mention that I'll go back and do right now is we talked about the ability to submit the ticket. And that's certainly a good thing, right? Again, we want them to be able to do that. But another thing that's really cool is that even after they've scheduled, right, they've got the appointment on, they've sent off the ticket, they have the ability to track that and see that from the portal. So in here, I have an ability for support tickets, which is going to show me all of the stuff that I've sent off recently, right? In this case, I'm an admin in the system. It's going to show me all of the tickets for the entire company. But if I were an end user, I would see my own tickets too. So it's not even just saying, hey, I want to go off and send a ticket. It's being able to see, what did I request? When did I request it? And I have all that ability to see that right here. So if the technician answers from the tool, it comes back in here. If we have follow-ups, it's in here. So it's really about reinforcing all of that process and making sure that it really is a holistic client experience, right? So with permission, right? I don't want to dive into it. Safi, do we have any questions or anything? Right?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions I want to put out there. When you were doing the example of scheduled training, Marcus Athiga, asked, it said, you selected a desired date. Is there any kind of logic that TimeZest uses to look at that date first?
Yeah, what we would do is we will default to the current date, but we give them the ability to override that and switch days if they'd like to look at a different day.
And then, and I think we're going to probably end up you're going to get into this in the next piece, but Dan Baird is asking if we can take a couple of minutes to show how we actually integrate those tools.
Sure.
And then he wanted to know, is there a way to use color or some other highly visible status indicator to show that a ticket in the CloudRadial portal needs the customer to schedule it?
As in, whenever we go into our statuses right here to see how they would be able to see.
I think that's what he's kind of referencing.
Okay, well let's dive into the technicalities in a second. I'll do the CloudRadial side, and then I'll turn it over to Gerwai to talk about the TimeZest side, because I think ours is relatively
simple. But make sure I think one of the things though that Dan really wants to see is how do you integrate the tools? Like how do you, I think it's how do you set it up in the integrations area.
So those familiar with CloudRadial in general know that we integrate with a lot of different tools, because again, our goal isn't to be the best reporting tool or this or that. It's just to be the center of the client experience, right? And we have a lot of different stuff in here that speaks to that, the ticketing, the training, the QBR stuff, but we're kind of meant for plug and play with a lot of stuff. And typically, if you're going for an integration of usual types in CloudRadial, you would go to your admin panel under partner, you would go to the settings at the very bottom, and 99% of the stuff you're going to deal with is going to be under this integrations option right here under configuration. That's not what we're talking about for TimeZest, because with TimeZest specifically, it's based off of those individual links, which again, we'll see. So actually how you'd set up TimeZest is whenever you build tickets, right? So I already have a bunch of them pre-built, and there's a whole logic that I'm going to skip over to not monopolize the entire conversation. The gist of the situation is that whenever you go into one and you build your form however you like it, so again, in this printer example, I've got my printer, I've got all the stuff, I've built whatever questions I want. The TimeZest piece comes in under the confirmation message. So CloudRadial has an option, right? It doesn't always come with it. It comes with it actually blank to enter a confirmation message. Now, usually you can type in whatever you want in here, anything from something as simple as thanks for submitting to whatever else. With TimeZest specifically, what we're doing is we're plugging in the URL for their scheduling into here to display that. It's actually pretty clever. There is a support article that I actually have pulled up. You can access it by, when you go to a ticket and go to confirmation, there's a little blue check mark that will open it up. And the gist of it is that we have a little HTML code. This is the article that pops up that basically you just insert in there. And all this is there's a specific source you replace with the TimeZest code. So right here it is, right? So what I've done in the actual ticket that we're looking at, let's go back over here, right? Basically what's happening is when I click on the code view, I've got that exact HTML code come in. I've got the TimeZest URL here. And the only caveat is, depending on the PSA that you're working with, is we replace the TimeZest, I think for ConnectWise has a built-in, I think it's like bracket, what is it, brackets, ticket ID or ticket something like that. We just use our inbuilt token. So this is the one replacement. Again, it has all of that written in here, yeah, the SR number. So all this is pasting and replacing SR number with ticket ID. And that's exactly what I've done. So whenever you look at that, the logic here is that it goes, okay, send this here, it'll pull the ticket number, and then it'll immediately notify, like the ticket goes through, it knows the ticket number, it knows who's submitting it, what company it's from, and what the ticket is in relation to, and that's how it displays it. So when you're looking at this backend preview, as I show you, you're getting an error message from TimeZest, and this is normal because it doesn't have a ticket ID. So this is cool. This is actually the sign of a proper setup when you're looking at this. And that's all there is to it. So what you would ordinarily do in CloudRadial, again, keeping this very brief, is obviously you're not going to touch every single client one by one like I'm doing, where I would go building tickets. CloudRadial has kind of a global repository of tickets under the partner drop down in the content. So in short, there is kind of a global set of templated tickets. In this case, I have one section right here for problem reports. I have one big catalog of tickets. And what I'm doing is I've created them from back here. I've gone ahead and chosen the tickets that require appointments from here, done the confirmation message, and pushed them out. So that way, all of the companies, whether I have 1 or 1,000, have that confirmation message baked in. And that way, whenever they hit the relevant ticket, the TimeZest message pops up. And I'll briefly, again, I'm going to pass it over to Gerwai to talk about the actual technicalities of it, but I'll briefly show our TimeZest. So in ours, I've got this right here. So this is our TimeZest, and I've got a couple of different appointment types. So the gist of this is I have my technicians, in this case, it's my 3 technicians, and then my team built, right? So whenever I plug in the different tickets, I have, for example, our service team, and then I have all these different unique links to get to them, right? So the service team, I have a remote access to the PC. I grab the URL and I paste it, and that's literally it, and then it works just fine. So it's all about selecting what you want from TimeZest, and obviously we're probably going to talk about how to build these and all the different use cases, but once you have that part built, copy, paste, good to go. In regard to the other question you had, just really quickly, I'm not quite sure about how we would go about that, because last little bit about CloudRadial is whenever we submit the ticket to the PSAs, not only obviously can we do the confirmation message and the questions we're asking, you guys have complete control over where it goes. So that would be controlled under the routing. So to the different boards with different statuses, different priorities, and all the trimmings down to the type and subtypes and blah, blah, blah. So I think what we're looking for is maybe some kind of way to highlight that the ticket has been required to need a meeting, which may be something we want to talk about as far as highlighting like a needs meeting status or something like that. That doesn't currently exist, so the short answer is you can't do it, but that's something we can look at doing for sure. I see where he's going with that.
I also want to get in here and ask some questions on the TimeZest side, because I've got a couple of those that are coming up. One question was, if we incorporate TimeZest, how can we control the text time not to be overwhelmed or taken all in client appointments without time for other tasks?
Good question. So there's a couple ways. If there's anything firm in their calendar, we're obviously going to observe that and not schedule over those particular items. But we also allow each individual user in TimeZest to have custom availability. So if you only want them receiving TimeZest scheduled items in the morning or the afternoon, you can shunt people down to those hours.
You want to go ahead and share screen your way? I don't know if you want to show anything in the TimeZest side. I can go ahead and stop and.
Yeah, let me give him control.
Sure. Go ahead and stop that. You can see my beautiful face a little bit bigger. You're welcome.
And by the way, Ricky, you've been making my job so easy. You covered so much ground without me needing to jump in.
You're like my CEO, which I haven't seen in months. Where are you, Jeff? I don't know.
He's here. He's here.
Let me get this done so I can switch over. Oh, gotcha. I've got to change some security preferences here. I apologize, everyone. So bear with me.
You're good. Yeah, I think in general, this is one of those things that when we talk about TimeZest and CloudRadial, I was kind of shocked because I think initially when you look at that, I mean, I use so many different appointment types to meet with different people, different vendors, different people when we talk for like support calls and all that kind of stuff. And it's crazy how something that you think is like, yeah, you can schedule a meeting, turns into this whole strategy. And it's not even about that necessarily for us. It's, again, I cannot stress enough how making the client experience good makes it worth it to get in there. So I think this is really, really worth a look because, again, nothing is more annoying to the client than going to, even if it's us, they go to the portal, they schedule a thing, or they go set up the ticket, and the next thing you know, they have to go schedule somewhere else and do this, do that. I think this is killer just because it brings everything into one place.
Okay, hopefully you can all see my screen now. Is that right?
Yep, see your TimeZest.
Yes, yeah.
So really quickly on the custom availability, so under users, you can go there. And in this case, we actually have Ben Bradley here who has some custom availability in his schedule already. So we can use the calendar from your PSA. So if you select this option, it'll pull in the calendar from your PSA that this member or user has configured for them. Or you can override that with custom availability from TimeZest. So this is your ability to move them out beyond, maybe they're in a shift that works later than your normal business hours, or if you want to just limit them to half a day's worth of scheduling items from TimeZest, you could do that with this functionality too. Cool. And I guess the other thing too that was mentioned with regards to the statuses, Ricky, we could even jump into that a little bit.
Sure.
Why don't I take a little bit of detail there and just jump in a little bit further. So this happens to be an example of our reactive support board that we've connected to in our ConnectWise configuration in this case. And we also integrate to AutoTask, so similar there also. These are the different statuses that you can have tickets change into during their life cycle. So in this case that we're talking about with the CloudRadial use case, you're going to see these hit this scheduling status. So after a scheduling event has happened, so after you go through that, select the time and confirm it, you can select what status you want from your PSA. And then you'll see that obviously in the CloudRadial portal, okay? If they happen to cancel, you want to allow them to cancel meetings with you. In particular cases, we allow you to configure that by appointment type. You can see a status change in that case too. And these are the two probably most important ones to be aware of as it relates to the CloudRadial use case. If you happen to receive tickets through email, these other two will kind of apply, which is you basically send off a scheduling request and you can get into kind of a no response situation where we're sending reminders and reminders trying to ask them to schedule. And then before you know it, some time has gone by that you configure here and we can change it into a no response status that you can take action on.
Is there a way, Chris McGlosson asked this, but you know, if you've got somebody who's on the phone during a call, doing a call, and they haven't picked up yet to get on to their appointment, you know, like they're running late, is there a workflow to letting that client know that things are running a little bit behind?
No, there isn't one internally in our system other than what we recommend in that case is use your PSA to close loop message them off of the ticket and do your normal communication you would off of service tickets.
Right, that's kind of how the direction I was thinking too, so.
I think
that's all that I have so far, but so I'll just let y'all keep going.
Sure.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and something else that I was again I can't stress enough, and I was wondering if you have any like tips or best practices, because we deal again with on the CloudRadial side a lot of different people that have different teams. So they might have a one-man shop that's literally obviously doing everything themselves. They might have different teams and all that kind of stuff. If there is kind of like a best practice to your team's methodology, I mean, do we split people up really focusing on the PSA? Can you build standalone teams within TimeZest itself with different people? Just I'm not.
Yeah, that's actually a really good one, Ricky, to talk about here. I'm glad we have time for that. One of the things that we do with regards to teams, so we have Microsoft Teams integration for virtual sessions. That's one thing. But then we're also talking about teams of text, teams of team members that we have in any use case that we might have to bring people together. And you see a couple of examples here on our Teams page. There are some companies that have the focus around pods and naming them specifically, right? And taking certain clients to work with given pods. We also see the tiered use case where you have tier 1 team members and tier 2 and so forth, okay? In both those situations, what we can do is we can pull from existing service boards or queues, pull those team members that already exist in those configurations in your PSA, and just drag them into TimeZest and keep them in sync. So you've taken the time to configure those teams. We want to help you just be able to pull those in, okay? But we also see a lot of cases where people have to put together custom defined teams. And so we allow you to do that. In this case, you see here, this is a TimeZest defined team. That's what we do. We allow you to pick from any user in TimeZest that is synced in from your PSA, and we will then allow you to configure them any combination you want. So you see a good example of that here down below. When you start getting into these specialist roles where you maybe have a non-technical dispatcher and you want them to just think with the system and not have to think so much about who should be getting this particular issue. So as an example, if you take all of your network specialists and put them in a group, you could even put them in different tiers, but just as an example, you can put them in a group, and effectively when you've got a networking problem, your dispatcher can say, okay, I just need the networking team on that. Put them on it, and they get scheduled for that. And so our thought process here, this is where our automation really shines. There's some pretty cool automation around scheduling one-on-one. But when it gets to teams, this is where we really excel and do some interesting stuff. So as an example, what we're doing in this case, and you mentioned it in your demonstration, Ricky, is that we're going to provide an exponential amount of time available to the end client when we start adding team members to a scheduling request, right? If you can imagine more calendars on our side results in more availability to the client and hopefully aligning better to their schedule. Okay, so that's job one. Job two is dispatchers and service managers are spending a lot of time these days going to dispatch portals when they try to schedule work to figure out two things: skill set, who should be working it, and of the people that can work a particular problem, who's got the most availability. Because we never want to load one person up. We need to do load balancing. We got to have utilization balanced out, and we will do that programmatically for people. So the example here is, imagine you've got this team, you've got 3 team members in it, okay? You send out that alpha pod request or service team request out to an end client. They select a time. If that time only works for 2 of the individuals in this team, we will be able to grab that in milliseconds and know it, right? And then the next thing that we're going to do is, based upon settings in TimeZest, be able to apply the schedule request to the one of those 2 people that has the most availability. Okay, so we're going to analyze their calendars. We're going to look at how much workload they've got on that given day, and then we're going to assign it to the person with the least amount of work, so that it balances out work throughout the teams. That's a huge factor. I mean, it's one thing that internal teams in MSP spend a lot of time doing with human brain processing, and we're trying to take that off their plate so they can work on more important things.
Sure. Yeah, and that's something else we talked about, and I want to make sure we know, because I think the strength here is that with the whole logic of having something like CloudRadial where it has customizable forms, is you're eliminating all that problem where of gathering the information, but this part is also huge. Again, matching up the right person to the right team is something that I deal with a lot with people that we talk to. And not only that, but like as the organizations get more complex, as things get kind of bigger and bigger, something that we run into is not just can we match ticket A to technician A, and not even just can we match technician A to ticket A, like vice versa. We want it to, sometimes there's even the use case where you want different companies to have different pods and everything in there. And I think your availability thing with your team is really huge, because there's ways to make CloudRadial and TimeZest talk so different companies are served different teams at different times. I mean, it's kind of crazy how much control there is when you have something like this that automatically does the load balancing for you. I think that's awesome.
And just to be clear, you can also do it directly from a service ticket. So if you happen to have that traditional ticket that's come in through an email, you can do it directly from here. You can set the team. You can set the type of meeting that needs to be scheduled with that team. Click schedule, and your team, your service manager, your dispatcher, a tech team member, they can all go off and do something else now. There's no more back and forth ping pong involved in trying to find time, schedule it, and get with that client.
Super awesome.
Okay, I've got a couple more questions that came up. Can TimeZest look at calendars outside of the PSA?
Oh, that's a good question. We are actually working on that right now in the garage. So development time is being spent on that, and we'll have news on that soon. And
then, okay, are you able to schedule 2 people on a team on a call through TimeZest?
Good question. So you can do it. You have this team that's been pre-configured, or if you know, let's say you've got a QBR meeting coming up, and this is a QBR service issue potentially, and you need the account manager, and you also need the head service manager on there. You can put them on there, and you can do a quarterly business review appointment type, send that out. And what you'll see here is when it comes to those 2 resources, what we're sending to Erica in this case, and the email to Erica as the contact, is the availability where these 2 people match up, where Ben and Christian's calendars match up.
Okay. And then Ricky, I can answer this, I think, but I'm gonna throw this over to you.
Sure.
On the account management side of things, and this is Dan Baird again. Can you demonstrate how we can fire off a TimeZest meeting scheduling request directly from the QBR VCIO planner tool, which I don't think we can do. Is that correct?
But not because the HTML, because there's an HTML section to that. The reason that we can't do that right now is because you can't generate tickets. And remember that for us, for CloudRadial to work, we need that ticket ID for it to work, right? So it's interesting you mentioned that, because when we talk about stuff in CloudRadial, and again, just in brief, right, we've played around with the idea of adding the ability to generate tickets from assessments, right? Our assessments have the ability, or will have the ability to eventually generate tickets from there. The planner items could do the same things. We have a road mapping tool. And I think once that ability is there, once we bake that in, there's no reason why it couldn't work. So currently it won't, there's no ticket ID, but pretty sure that'll be something we should look to in the future.
Yeah, Dan, you should put that on the feature request board.
I think it's,
in partner account, right-hand side. And then kind of going back to the question that Paul Burnett asked about, scheduling 2 people, also wanted to know, can you also schedule multiple people via URL instead of from the ticket?
Yes, yeah, good question. So this setup you saw here where we have multiple resources, that can also be done in a shareable URL too.
And then when an appointment is booked via CloudRadial, and I guess this goes to Ricky, is the internal notes still updated with the appointment information, best contact, etc., etc.?
Yeah, it would be. It would naturally, because that's our engine that's taking over at that point to push those internal notes.
And then Paul Blake wanted to know, does CloudRadial have a demo site that we can poke around in, both on the client side and on the MSP side? And I'm going to say no to that. You can, if you are not a client, obviously you have a trial of TimeZest, you can play with the 2 of them. Or if you are an existing customer, you can, trial one and put that information and go ahead and play with your trial account with the TimeZest piece. But we don't have anything actively up that you can poke around in.
That's a good question though. But I think a lot of times, just because that's near and dear to my heart, I hate it when I go into a thing and then it's like, even when I watch a webinar and look at all the stuff you can do, and then it's like I have to read 18 things to figure out how to do it. So I think what's nice about when you spin up a trial is all the stuff I showed you is like 90% of the way there. So all you'd be doing is, if you have TimeZest or if you have CloudRadial, is literally just modifying one of the existing tickets and pasting the code and then changing one thing. But other than that, like, it's unfortunate we don't have like a ready to go one that you can just see it work, but putting one together should be pretty quick. I mean,
but Ricky, it's real easy to do inside their existing running account.
If you have an existing account, it's literally just confirmation message and then pasting that HTML code. But I'm saying if you don't have one, if you want to spin up a trial, all the stuff we looked at, even on the call today, should already be in there. So it's just a matter of putting your link in there and it should be good.
Okay, gotcha.
So at the very least, I guess the end point of that is we're not making you go, hey, go build your ticket, generate your thing. It's like, just hook it up. But again, remember too, that for us to work with it, and I want to double confirm this, Gerwai, it's currently only with Autotask and ConnectWise PSAs that this will work, right? Yeah,
right.
Okay.
Yep.
And then Dan Baird came back and said, what about TimeZest? Is there some way in your tool to give clients a landing page with an option for service appointment type or meeting length option or preferred contact type, Zoom versus Teams versus phone? Kind of like how Calendly does it.
No, not
where he's going with that.
What we do is, so let's just go back to TimeZest really quick. What we've had a lot of customers do actually is they build that themselves on a web page. So they build the web page, and then what they do is they take these URLs, these URL-based scheduling URLs, and post them, or our shareable URLs where it doesn't have to be tied to a ticket. You can effectively create a scheduling event with us, and we will create the service ticket for you. So there's some use cases where that applies. And for example, like, here's a good example of one at the bottom here, a sales discovery call. You could put that on your website, you could put it in emails, and what you would use is you'd use this shareable URL here without a service ticket number associated with it at the end. We'll generate those for you. And in the case of ConnectWise, we can do activities. And then I should also mention too, it's new integration for us. So with Autotask, I believe we create to-dos in that case.
Yeah, so and back to what Dan was saying, that I think then if you wanted to do what you were talking about before with in regard to using that in the roadmap and stuff, if you use the shareable URL, it would work. Obviously, it wouldn't be like the blade wouldn't pop up with the specific things, but at the very least, you can give them an option to create that right there and then. That might be a workaround. Any other questions, Safi?
No, I think that's, I mean, I'm keeping up with them pretty well.
Cool.
Or y'all are keeping up with them pretty well, I should say.
Good teamwork.
Just firing them at you. Just firing them at you.
That's pretty good. Yeah,
Thanks for all your help with it.
Yeah, I'm spoiled. I can't do a webinar without Safi anymore. Like if I don't have something to go like, who's doing questions? Any questions?
It's hard to keep up with them all. You know, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in the background.
Yeah, I think that I think because again, I am known to talk too much and too quickly, so I like to shut up whenever possible. So I think for me, that's really all I've wanted to cover about CloudRadial, and I wanted to make sure that I replug my the links and everything. And I wanted to talk about the discounts are for cross promotion purposes. But if you have anything else you want to show Gerwai, I don't want to cut you off. So let me know.
Nope, I went ahead and shut down my sharing there, I believe.
Cool. Yep. Let me go ahead and get that screen share, Safi, and I'll throw on a little closer.
Hold on. Give it back to you. I think I have another question that came back in. It says you mentioned that you can set it so specific clients will only see availability for certain engineers. Does this go deep enough that you can set the system to say specific users, like a CEO of a company, will only see availability for specific engineers? Okay, do I have to read that one again? That was a long one.
I think, Ricky, this might start on your side potentially because you'd have to serve up different appointments.
Well, technically, yes. So there's a way to do it. It would be somewhat complex, but actually, I'll show you what you would do. So again, in our premise of CloudRadial, when you're looking at the tickets in general, I believe I'm sharing my screen, right? Can you see this?
Can you see? Okay.
I can see it. Yep.
The gist of what we were talking about before is that I gave you kind of like one of the more simple and more common examples in that I have kind of a templated zone. I have one big package of stuff that is currently going to every user, every company, boom, they get served this catalog of tickets. If they hit a VPN ticket, hypothetically, right, you would have the VPN team. Now, in the way that you're talking about, it is possible, but what that would require is that you would have to have a ticket or set of tickets go to specific people. So perhaps in the general catalog, it goes to a round robin thing, but perhaps what you can do is whenever you look at a specific ticket, I'll make an example locally here, instead of building it off and having that generic link, I can choose different levels of users and user groups. So I can tag my users as, for example, admin or CEO or whatever. And for this specific user group, I can have a different link show up. So theoretically, it looks like everybody has the same stuff, but on the back end, the admins are getting served, or in this case, the CEO is getting served a confirmation that leads to a different technician. So TimeZest really wouldn't have much to do with that because they would just read it as they do. That would be more on the CloudRadial side to route the right stuff to them. But yes, it would be possible. Something that wouldn't be too difficult either, actually, with the groups. This is the different user groups of it. Any other questions?
I think that so far, I think that's it. I think we're good.
Cool. Yeah, I wanted to bring up, so this is now, it comes back into play about what we were talking about before, the PowerPoint. So again, the main thing for us is the cloudradial.com/TimeZest pricing, which is going to include a couple of kind of key discounts that I think are going to be really cool for TimeZest users. I'm pulling it up right now so I don't just mention it. Let's do that. Should have had it prepped, but you know me, Safi, I like to.
I know. You do well on the fly.
Well, you know. All right, so here's our page for that. So you're going to see that you're going to get our onboarding fee waived, and you're going to get $100 off for the first 3 months, which is pretty sweet. And then you can see all the details, the pricing, and how all the other stuff that CloudRadial does, locked and loaded in there. So there's that. And then as far as TimeZest itself, right, Gerwai and I were talking, you're going to get 10% off for the first 12 months. And the way that works is when you're taking a look at that, you're going to be working with a TimeZest person. Let them know you're a CloudRadial customer, and they'll take care of you that way, I believe is the current play. In regard to the webinar itself, we of course have been recording this, so we will be posting this, and I think we're going to be following up with an email with these details, or at least some of these details in there. So If you missed it, if something else happened and you didn't quite pay attention or you didn't quite get this, we'll have all that recapped at the very end. And last but not least, a special thank you to everyone for taking the time to join us. Always nice to have people that actually listen. Pretty cool. And yeah, thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah, and just remember, it's all, this is a modern customer experience, and I think with both pieces, with CloudRadial and TimeZest, we're only making it better, and we are better together. So I wanted to, again, thank everybody for joining us. There are some other CloudRadial webinars on our website, cloudradial.com, resources you can check out. And Gerwai, we thank you very much for joining us today and participating with us, and hope everybody has a great day.
Yeah, thanks for hosting. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, y'all.
All right, take care.